People ask me how I
Help
built
me with
Morrison
this one.
Ridge Ranch from
I've got
nothing.
it.
They want to know the business secrets,
There, that's
the
better.
investment strategies, the
This
tricks
one
of the
feels off.
trade.
Let's check inside.
But the truth is
Right.
my greatest
Careful with the
success had
seams.
nothing to do with cattle or land deals.
We can't wait any
It
longer.
started
We
on
have
a
to go
Wednesday
now.
morning in
But what if they
October of
find us? It's a
1876 when
risk
I
we have
walked
to
into
take.
Miller's
She's
General
right.
Store and witnessed something that made my blood boil in a way I hadn't felt in 14 years. I was 31 years old that day, 31 years of proving everyone wrong about who I would become, 31 years of building something from the ashes my father left behind. The morning had started like any other. I'd been up before dawn, checking fence lines, counting heads, making sure the men knew their assignments for the day. Morrison Ridge was thriving, 5,000 acres of prime grazing land, 3,000 head of cattle, 50 men on the payroll. I'd done what everyone said was impossible. The son of a drunk had become one of the most successful ranchers in 3 territories. But sitting here now, looking back across the years, I know that none of that mattered as much as what happened next. I rode into Pinewood Springs that Wednesday needing supplies. Rope a new saddle cinch, 50 pounds of good oats. The kind of routine trip I'd made 100 times before. My mind was on business. Edward Sterling, who owned the second largest ranch in the area, had proposed a partnership. It would expand my markets, increase profits. A smart move, everyone said. But something about it didn't sit right with me. I tied my horse outside Miller's and pushed through the door, ducking slightly under the frame. At 6'2", I'd learned to watch for doorways. The bell jangled overhead. The familiar scent of coffee and leather filled the air. And then I heard the laughter. Not the good kind, the cruel kind that makes your spine stiffen. 3 women stood near the fabric counter. I recognized them immediately. Margaret Ashford, the banker's wife, in burgundy silk that probably cost more than most families earned in 2 years. Caroline Thornton, the mayor's wife, in emerald taffeta that rustled with every breath. And Rebecca Sterling, Edward's daughter, in a rose-colored dress shipped all the way from San Francisco. They were circling someone, a young woman I didn't recognize. Even from behind, I could see the careful mending on her dress, the patches sewn with obvious skill. She stood straight back despite the trembling in her shoulders, clutching a shopping list in one hand and a small coin purse in the other. Margaret Ashford's voice carried across the store, sweet as poisoned honey. "Is that a quilt pretending to be a dress?" The other women tittered. I felt my jaw tighten. I'd seen a lot in my 31 years. I'd seen men fight over land, over money, over pride. I'd faced down claim jumpers and weather that could kill a man in hours. But this? 3 women in dresses, worth a fortune, using their wealth as a weapon against someone who had none. That stirred something in me I didn't expect. The young woman turned slightly and I saw her face. Dark eyes that were fighting back tears but refusing to lower. A chin held high despite everything. And in that moment I recognized something. Not her. I'd never seen her before. But I recognized the look. Pride. Not the arrogant kind that comes from money. The kind that comes from knowing you've worked for everything you have. The kind that comes from surviving. I knew it because I saw it in my own mirror every morning. Rebecca Sterling leaned in, her voice dripping with a false concern. Some people simply refuse to accept that they don't belong in polite company. They parade into town wearing, well, I hesitate to even call them clothes. And that's when the young woman spoke. Her voice shook, but it didn't break. My mother made this dress before she died. Every stitch by her own hands. When it wore thin, I mended it also with my own hands because neither my father nor I have the luxury of ordering new dresses from San Francisco catalogs. We have a farm to keep running trees, to tend a life to build with what we have. The words hit me like a fist to the chest, not because I pitied her, I hated pity, but because I heard the echo of my own life in those words. Building a life with what we have, that was exactly what I'd done. Taken 10 head of cattle and a piece of land nobody wanted and turned it into an empire. And I realized this girl, whoever she was, understood something those women in their silk dresses would never understand. That dignity doesn't come from money. It comes from character. I had a choice in that moment. I could buy my supplies and leave. That would be the smart move, the safe move. Margaret Ashford was married to the man who controlled most of the loans in the territory. Caroline Thornton's husband was the mayor. Rebecca Sterling's father had just offered me a lucrative business deal. Speaking up would make enemies, powerful enemies. But then I thought about my father. The old man had taught me a lot, mostly what not to do. But there was one thing my mother said before she died when I was just 10 years old. She looked at me with those gray eyes I'd inherited and said, "Jack, who you become when nobody's watching, that's who you really are." And I knew this was that moment. This was when I decided who I was. I walked past the three women like they were furniture, stopped beside the young woman. Up close, I could smell apple blossoms and simple soap. She was tall enough that the top of her head reached my shoulder. When she glanced up at me, startled, I saw the depth in those brown eyes. Intelligence, strength, fear, hope. I turned to face the three wealthy women, took my time making eye contact with each one, let the silence stretch. "I couldn't help but overhear this conversation," I said. My voice was quiet. I've learned that quiet often carries more weight than shouting. And I feel compelled to make something very clear. Margaret Ashford's face flushed. She opened her mouth to speak, but I continued. "This young woman is wearing honest clothes earned through honest work. She walks in here with her head up, accounts paid, tending her family's land with her own two hands. She asks nothing from anyone except the right to purchase supplies she can afford." I paused, let that sink in, then looked at each of them in turn. "And you three walk in here wearing dresses that cost more than some families will see in a year. You use that wealth like a weapon. You mock someone for having less, for working harder, for making do with what she has and doing it with skill and dignity." My heart was pounding. Not from fear. I'd faced down rustlers and blizzards. A few angry women didn't scare me. No, my heart pounded because I knew I was crossing a line. After this moment, things would change. And strangely, I didn't regret it. I let the next words ring clearer across the store. "She's the finest woman in this store." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the normal sounds from the street outside seemed to fade. Thomas Miller, the shop owner, stood frozen behind the counter. Margaret Ashford's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Carolyn Thornton suddenly found the button display fascinating. Rebecca Sterling's face went from pale to crimson. "Of all the..." Rebecca started, her voice shrill. I turned to her, didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. "Miss Sterling, I suggest you consider your next words very carefully. I'm not a man who issues empty warnings." Her mouth snapped shut. I turned back to the young woman. She was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Shock, disbelief, and something else. Something that made my chest tighten. "Miss," I said gently. "Hartley," she whispered. "Emma Hartley." "Miss Hartley." I nodded once. "I apologize that your simple errand became complicated." "You didn't have to," she began. "Yes," I said. "I did." I walked to the counter, ordered my supplies from a still-stunned Thomas Miller. 3 coils of rope, a new saddle cinch, 50 pounds of the good oats. The whole time I was aware of Emma Hartley gathering her own purchases, aware of the 3 women whispering furiously in the corner, aware that something fundamental had just shifted in my life. I heard the wagon wheels on the gravel outside. Slow. An old horse probably. And I found myself wondering if I'd see her again. If I should see her again. The practical part of me, the part that had built Morrison Ridge from nothing, said to let it be. "You did a good thing. Don't complicate it." But there was another voice, quieter but more persistent. "She's the finest woman in there. And you know it's true." I loaded my supplies into my saddlebags and rode back to the ranch. Daniel, my younger brother, was waiting on the porch. 21 years old and still learning what it meant to be a man. He took one look at my face and grinned. "What did you do?" I told him. Not because I needed to justify myself, but because he needed to learn this lesson. Sometimes doing the right thing has a cost, but not doing the right thing costs more. "So what happens next?" Daniel asked when I finished. "Nothing," I said. "I said what needed saying. Now I move on." "But you'll see her again, right?" That was the question, wasn't it? I'd defended her because it was right. But now, sitting on the porch of the house I'd built with 14 years of sweat and blood, looking out over land I'd turned into something valuable, I couldn't deny that I wanted to see her again. Not because I'd saved her, but because of the way she'd stood there, spine straight, despite trembling, voice steady, despite being hurt. That was strength, real strength. The next morning, Edward Sterling rode up to Morrison Ridge. He was a big man in his 50s, used to getting his way. He sat his horse like he owned the ground beneath it. "Jack," he said, "heard an interesting story about a scene at Miller's yesterday. News travels fast in small towns. My daughter was quite upset, and my wife, well, best not to speak of my wife. But Jack, that's family business. What I'm concerned about is that partnership we discussed." There it was, the price. Edward Sterling controlled the eastern shipping routes. Partnering with him could double my markets. But now he was using that as leverage. "Rebecca is my only daughter," Edward continued. "She's been, shall we say, interested in you for some time, and I think a union between Sterling Branch and Morrison Ridge would benefit us both." My jaw tightened. "Mr. Sterling, I respect you as a businessman, but I can't and won't let business dictate my personal life. Rebecca is a fine woman, but we're not suited, and I have no interest in family alliances." Edward's face reddened. "So the poor farmer's daughter suits you, a girl with nothing but a small orchard and a dying old man." And that's when I knew exactly what I wanted. Not because Edward Sterling had insulted me. I'd heard every insult there was, but because of how he'd spoken about Emma Hartley. Nothing. She had everything that mattered. Dignity, skill, strength. I stood. "Mr. Sterling, I think this conversation is over. If you want to discuss business based on value, I'm happy to listen. But if you're trying to control my personal life, we have nothing to talk about." Edward left angry, made vague threats. Daniel watched him go. "You just lost a major partner," he said. "No little brother. I just avoided a bad deal. There's a difference." That evening I rode to Doc Patterson's house. Henry Patterson was 62, had been doctoring in the territory since before I was born. He'd been friends with my father before the drinking got bad. One of the few people who'd believed in me when I was 17 and broke. "I need you to tell me about someone," I said. "William Hartley and his daughter." Doc looked at me over his spectacles. "Wondered when you'd ask. Heard about Miller's." He told me the story. William Hartley, 54 veteran, came to Utah 15 years ago with his wife. She died 8 years back. Lung fever. He'd planted an orchard from nothing. Now had 17 different varieties of apples growing where everyone said they wouldn't survive. Emma, his only daughter, 24 years old, had been taking care of him and the orchard alone since her mother passed. "William's heart is weak," Doc said. "Joints paining him bad. He might not make it through another winter." "Why doesn't he see a doctor?" Doc gave me a look. "Because they don't have money, Jack. They live harvest to harvest. And with William's condition, they're racing time." And that's when I knew what I was going to do, not out of pity. I hated pity. But because I realized something. If nobody helped, Emma Hartley would lose her father and probably the farm. She'd be alone. And a woman with that kind of strength shouldn't have to face tragedy alone. "Doc, I need you to do something for me." 8 days later, I rode out to the Hartley place, 8 miles east of town at the end of a rutted road. I told myself it was business. I was considering planting an orchard at Morrison Ridge, and William Hartley was the best expert in the territory. That was the excuse. But the truth I could barely admit to myself was that I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way she'd stood firm, about the voice that shook but didn't break, about eyes full of dignity. The Hartley homestead came into view, a small cabin weathered but well-maintained, a modest barn, and beyond it the treasure. 5 acres of apple trees in neat rows, branches heavy with late-season fruit. William Hartley sat on the porch in a rocking chair. He was breathing hard, even sitting still. But his eyes were sharp and bright when he saw me. "Mr. Morrison," he said. His voice was rough but steady. "I wondered when you'd come." "You knew I would. A man doesn't defend my daughter in front of a crowd, then disappear, and news travels fast in small towns." I liked this old man immediately. No flattery, no empty thanks, just the straight assessment of one man measuring another. This was the kind of person I understood. "The orchard's out back," William said. "Emma's there taking notes. But before you go, I need to say something." He paused, looked at me hard. "My daughter is all I have in this world. I taught her to work hard, stand straight, and never let poverty define her worth. She's stronger than she knows, and if you're here with any intentions that aren't honorable—" "Mr. Hartley," I said, meeting his eyes, "I'm here for 2 reasons. One, I'm seriously considering planting an orchard at my ranch and you're the best expert. Two, I wanted to make sure there were no consequences from last week. I paused, chose my next words carefully. As for your daughter, I don't know what my intentions are yet, but I promise you this. Whatever happens, I will always respect her. William studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough. Orchards that way. I walked between the rows of trees, and that's when I saw her. Emma Hartley standing in a pool of sunlight, carefully noting something in an old ledger. She wore a simple work dress, her dark hair escaping from its braid. There was dirt under her fingernails. Not from laziness, but from honest work. The muscles in her arms were defined from years of labor. When she looked up and saw me, something happened in my chest. Like a piece I didn't know was missing, suddenly clicking into place. Mr. Morrison, she said, surprise in her voice. Miss Hartley? I removed my hat. I hope I'm not intruding. I spoke with your father. I have some business to discuss with him, but the truth is I wanted to see this orchard, and I wanted to make sure you were all right, that there were no problems after the incident. I haven't been back to town since then, she said. So I suppose I'll find out eventually. I moved closer, studied the trees with genuine interest. Your father said you've been helping with the orchard since you were a girl, that you know these trees as well as he does. I do. Pride crept into her voice despite herself. Each one has its own personality, its own needs. This one here produces more than any other, but only if you prune it heavily in winter. And that one 3 rows over will drop half its fruit if we get an early frost. So we have to harvest it first. How many varieties? 17. My father spent years collecting different types, testing which would survive our winters and still produce fruit worth selling. Some people thought he was crazy planting an orchard this far north. But he proved them wrong, I said. He created something valuable, something that will outlast him and keep producing long after he's gone. That's the kind of legacy that matters. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw the moment she understood that I wasn't just making conversation. I meant it. My father died when I was 17, I heard myself say. Left me nothing but debts and a reputation for drinking and bad decisions. I spent the next 14 years building Morrison Ridge Ranch, from 10 head of cattle and a piece of land nobody wanted. That's remarkable, she said softly. It's necessary, I corrected. I'm trying to build something that will last, something that means more than just money in a bank. And that's why what you and your father have done here matters so much. You're not just growing apples. You're proving that with knowledge and persistence, you can thrive even when circumstances are hard. I paused, looked at her directly. That's worth more than all the silk dresses in Pinewood Springs. Her throat worked, her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry, just nodded once, accepting the truth of it. We walked through the orchard together. She explained her father's techniques. I asked questions. Real questions, because I genuinely wanted to know. And more than that, I wanted to hear her voice. Watch the way her face lit up when she talked about grafting and cross-pollination. When we circled back to the cabin, I knew I had to address the other reason I'd come. Your father mentioned he hasn't been feeling well, I said carefully. His joints pain him, and he's been having spells where he's short of breath. Emma stiffened. We're managing. I'm sure you are. But doctor, Patterson in Pinewood Springs is a good man. He's been tending my ranch hands for years. I pay him a retainer to be available for my men. Having him check another patient wouldn't cost me anything extra. I paused. This was the tricky part. I'd consider it a personal favor. I'd like to know your father's getting proper care. She looked at me, searching for the catch, for the charity. I'll need to ask my father. Of course. I found William on the porch, told him straight out what I'd arranged. He studied me with those sharp eyes. You're a smooth one, Morrison. I like that. But let's be clear about this. If you're helping out of pity, I'll refuse. If you're helping because you see my daughter as a charity project, I'll run you off. I don't pity you, sir, I said honestly. I respect you. A man who builds something from nothing, who outlasts everyone who said he'd fail, I understand that man. I've been that man. I paused, chose honesty over strategy. As for Emma, I don't know what will happen there, But I know a woman with that kind of strength and skill shouldn't have to worry about her father not getting medical care because of money. William looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. All right, I'll see your doctor. As I prepared to leave, Emma walked me to my horse. The sun was setting, painting the orchard in gold and amber light. Mr. Morrison, she said, then corrected herself. Jack. The dress you're wearing now, I said, looking at her. It suits you perfectly. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I rode away as the last light faded, but I couldn't stop myself from looking back once. She was still standing there, watching me go. That night, I sat alone on my porch at Morrison Ridge. Daniel had gone to bed. The ranch was quiet except for the night sounds. Cattle lowing, wind in the grass. I looked out over everything I'd built. 5,000 acres, 3,000 head, buildings and corrals, and a reputation that had taken 14 years to earn. And I realized I'd built half a life. I had the land, the cattle, the success, but I didn't have anyone to share it with. No partner, no real home, just a house. And in one day, in one moment, at Miller's General Store, I'd seen the other half. I'd seen it in a woman wearing a patched dress who stood firm against cruelty with dignity and strength. I'd seen it in the orchard she tended with skill and knowledge. I'd seen it in the way she loved her father. The question was whether I had the courage to pursue it, to risk the heart I'd protected for 14 years, to build something bigger than just success, to build a family. Daniel came out, couldn't sleep apparently. You all right? I looked at my younger brother. He needed to see this, needed to understand that there were moments in a man's life when everything hinged on a single decision. Daniel, I said slowly, I think I just decided to do the craziest thing I've ever done. What's that? I'm going to marry Emma Hartley. He grinned. About time, brother, about time. I sat there in the darkness, thinking about the road ahead. There would be obstacles. Rebecca Sterling and her father would cause trouble. The Ashfords would spread gossip. The decent people would need convincing. But I'd built Morrison Ridge against longer odds than that. I'd turned nothing into something when everyone said I'd fail. I'd survived my father's legacy and created my own. And if Emma Hartley would have me, I'd build the other half of my life with the same determination. Not because I needed to be saved, not because she did, but because together we'd create something neither of us could build alone. A legacy worth leaving, a family worth fighting for, a love worth the risk. I'd made my choice that day in Miller's General Store, not just to defend her, but to become the kind of man who would defend her. Every day, for the rest of my life, and sitting there under the stars, I knew that was the best decision I'd ever make. The next morning, I rode into town before dawn, not to the general store, to Doc Patterson's house on the edge of Pinewood Springs. The old man answered his door in his shirt sleeves, spectacles perched on his nose, already awake and reading by lamplight. Jack Morrison, he said, I figured you'd be back. I need advice, Doc, not about cattle or land, about a woman. He smiled, set down his book, poured 2 cups of coffee without asking if I wanted any. Emma Hartley. How did you know? Jack. I've known you since you were 10 years old. I've never seen you look at anyone the way you looked at her in Miller's store. And yes, I was there, in the back, but I saw everything. I sat down heavily. The coffee was strong and bitter the way I liked it. I don't know what I'm doing, Doc. I've built a ranch from nothing, faced down rustlers and weather that could kill a man. But this, I don't know how to do this. Doc Patterson leaned back in his chair. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 6 decades of watching people make mistakes and occasionally get things right. Emma Hartley is not like the other girls in this town, Jack. She's been hurt, mocked. She won't trust pretty words easily. You need to prove yourself, not with words, with actions. What kind of actions? You do what you do best, build. But this time you're not building a ranch, you're building trust. I rode back to Morrison Ridge as the sun broke over the mountains. Doc's words echoed in my mind. Build trust, show up, prove it through action. That I could do, that I understood. Over breakfast, I told Daniel my plan. I'm going to court her properly, visit twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays, always with a legitimate reason, discussing the orchard, bringing news lending books. Spend time with William, earn his respect, show Emma I'm serious. Daniel grinned. You're applying ranch management principles to courting. I'm applying the only principles I know. Consistency, reliability, follow through. The first visit was a Tuesday. I brought detailed plans for the Morrison Ridge orchard sketched out on good paper. William studied them with the eye of an expert, made suggestions, nodded approval at the south-facing slope. I'd chosen the drainage considerations, the wind protection. You've done your homework, he said. I want to do it right. And I want Emma involved in every decision, choosing varieties, planning layout, teaching me what I need to know. Emma looked up from her own work. That's a project that would take years. I met her eyes, let the moment stretch. I'm hoping you'll be around for years. The second visit I brought books, agricultural journals from back east, a novel Daniel had finished, newspapers from Salt Lake City. William devoured them. We talked politics and weather and the future of the territory, man-to-man conversations that built respect brick by brick. Emma listened from across the room, mending by lamplight. Sometimes she joined in. Her opinions were sharp, well-considered. I found myself watching her hands as she worked. Quick, precise, skilled. Everything she did with competence. The third visit, everything changed. I arrived to find William looking grayer than usual. He waved off my concern, but I could hear the rattle in his breathing. Emma's eyes were tight with worry. She was trying to hide. After an hour of conversation, William excused himself to rest. Emma walked me to my horse. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and red. He's getting worse, she said quietly. I can see it even if he pretends otherwise. Doc Patterson will be here next week. He'll know what to do. And if there's nothing to be done, I turned to face her fully. Emma, I've learned something in 14 years of ranching. You can't control the weather. You can't control disease or bad luck. But you can control how you prepare, how you fight, how you refuse to give up. Her voice was barely a whisper. I'm scared. I know, but you're not alone. She looked up at me. In the fading light, her eyes were dark and deep. Why are you doing this, Jack, really? I could have given her easy answers, could have been smooth and charming. But Doc's words echoed. Prove it through action, through honesty. Because from the moment I saw you stand up to those women, I recognized something in you that I've spent 14 years trying to build in myself. Real strength, the kind that comes from surviving, not from money or position. And Emma, I find myself wanting to be near you as much as possible. Before she could respond, I mounted my horse and rode away. Left her with the truth hanging in the air between us. The fourth visit brought trouble. I arrived to find a well-dressed rider already there. Frank Ashford, the banker. Margaret Ashford's husband. A thin man with calculating eyes and a smile that never reached them. Morrison, he said when I dismounted. Didn't expect to see you here. Tuesday visit, standing appointment. His smile tightened. How convenient. I actually came on business. Seems there's a small matter of a loan, $2,000 for equipment, due in installments over 2 years. My stomach tightened. I knew exactly what he was talking about. That loan isn't due for another 18 months. Ah, but there's a clause, callable at the bank's discretion. And Mr. Morrison, I'm calling it, full payment in 30 days. There it was, the price for defending Emma. Frank Ashford was putting financial pressure on me, expecting me to back down, to apologize, to stay away from Emma, to protect my business interests. You'll have your money in 30 days, I said evenly. His eyebrows rose. That's a substantial sum on short notice. I'll sell part of my herd early. It'll hurt profits, but I can cover it. I looked him directly in the eye. Mr. Ashford, if you're betting that I'll sacrifice principle for profit, you don't know me very well. After he left, William called me inside. Emma was white-faced, having heard everything. You're going to lose money because of me, she said. No, I'm going to lose money because I chose to do what's right. There's a difference. William's voice was rough. Why Morrison? Why take this kind of hit for us? Because something matter more than money. And because I've been where you are, 17 years old, broke, everyone betting I'd fail. If someone had given me a hand up instead of kicking me down, maybe those first years wouldn't have been so hard. I paused, met his eyes. And because your daughter is worth fighting for. The following week brought more complications. I was out checking fence lines when one of my men rode up fast. Boss, you got a visitor at the main house. Miss Rebecca Sterling, I cursed under my breath. Rode back to find Rebecca waiting on my porch like she owned it. She was dressed to impress, hair perfect, smile calculated. Jack, darling, we need to talk. Miss Sterling, I stayed in the saddle, didn't dismount. A deliberate choice. If this is about business, you should send your father. Don't be coy. The whole territory is talking about you and that farmer's girl. Jack, be reasonable. She has nothing. No money, no connections, no future. Her father's dying. My voice went cold. Get off my land. Excuse me. I said get off my land. And Miss Sterling, don't come back unless it's business with your father, and even then send word first. Her face flushed with fury. You'll regret this. My father controls the eastern routes. Without him, you're cut off from half your markets. That's his choice to make. But I won't be blackmailed into courting someone I don't care for. After she left, Daniel found me in the barn, working off anger by mucking out stalls. You just made another enemy, he observed. No, I just drew a line. There's a difference. But the consequences came fast. Within a week, Edward Sterling withdrew his partnership offer. Worse, he started spreading the word that Morrison Ridge was over-leveraged, unstable. Several buyers backed out of contracts. Then the rumors started. Mrs. Ashford's doing, no doubt, that Emma was a gold digger, that she'd trapped me with her father's illness, that I was being played for a fool. I was in town picking up feed when I overheard two men talking at the livery. Morrison's lost his mind over some girl in a patched dress. Sterling says he'll be broke inside a year. I kept walking, didn't engage. But inside I was calculating. How much damage could they do? How long could I hold out? The answer surprised me. Longer than they thought. I'd built Morrison Ridge with no help, no connections, nothing but work and will. I could survive this. The question was whether Emma could survive the gossip. That Tuesday I arrived to find Emma in tears in the orchard. She tried to hide it, but I saw. What happened? I went to town yesterday, to Miller's. Mrs. Thornton was there. She said terrible things, that I was using my father's illness to trap you, that everyone knows I'm after your money. Rage flooded through me, pure and hot. Emma, look at me. She did, eyes red-faced streaked. Do you remember what I told those women at Miller's? You're the finest woman in that store. I meant it then. I mean it now, and I don't care what they say. But your business, all the trouble with the Sterlings and the Ashfords, it's because of maybe. No, it's because of them. Because they can't stand someone choosing character over convenience. Emma, I've lost business before. I've lost money, lost deals, lost sleep. But I've never lost respect for myself, and I won't start now. I took a breath, made a decision. There's a Founders' Day celebration in 3 weeks, the biggest social event of the winter. I want you to come with me, as my guest, in front of everyone. Her eyes went wide. Jack, they'll destroy me. Or they'll have to accept that I've made my choice and that choice is final. Emma, I'm tired of hiding. I want everyone in the territory to see us together. I want no doubt about my intentions. I don't have a dress suitable for that kind of event. Then make one. Show them your skills. Prove that talent and hard work matter more than silk and snobbery. She was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. All right, I'll go. Victory surged through me, but it was short-lived. The next day, Doc Patterson came to the ranch. His face was grave. It's William, he said without preamble. His heart is failing faster than I hoped. The consumption is in his lungs now. Jack, if we're lucky, he has until spring, but I don't think he'll see another winter. The words hit like a physical blow. Does Emma know? William asked me to tell her. I did this morning. She's well, you can imagine. I rode to the Hartley place immediately, found Emma sitting beside her father's bed. William was awake, propped up on pillows, breathing labored but eyes clear. Morrison, he rasped. Doc told you. Yes, sir. Then you know we're racing time. He looked at his daughter. I need to see her settled before I go. That's all I want, to know she won't be alone. I pulled up a chair, sat so I could look William Hartley in the eye man to man. Sir, I need to be direct with you. I love your daughter. I know it's fast. I know it's only been a few months, but it's the truth, and I want to marry her. with your blessing. William studied me for a long time. Emma had gone very still beside him. What kind of life can you give her? He asked finally. An equal partnership. I don't want Emma to decorate my house or host parties. I want her making decisions about the ranch. I want her designing and managing the orchard we'll build. I want her voice to matter in every choice we make. And what about me? You'll have a home at Morrison Ridge for as long as you live, not as a burden, as family. I want your expertise helping establish the orchard. I want to know you better learn from you have the privilege of calling you father. William's eyes were bright with unshed tears. He reached for Emma's hand with one of his extended the other to me. Then you have my blessing, my encouragement, and my joy. Emma was crying openly now. I wanted to hold her, but propriety kept me in my chair. Instead, I just held William's hand and made a silent promise. I would take care of his daughter. I would honor his legacy. I would build something worthy of the trust he was placing in me. After a while, William grew tired. Emma walked me out to the porch. The sun was setting again. Seemed like all our important moments happened in that golden light. Jack, she said softly, I'm terrified. Of what? Of losing Papa, of being alone, of hoping this is real and waking up to find it was a dream. I turned to face her, took her hands in mine for the first time. They were work-roughened, skilled strong. It's real, Emma. I promise you it's real. And you won't be alone. You'll have me. But what if I'm not good enough for you? What if your friends, your business partners, or what if they're right and I bring you down? Emma, my Hartley, listen to me. In 14 years of building Morrison Ridge, I've learned to recognize value. Real value, not the kind that comes from money or social standing, the kind that comes from character. And you have more of that than anyone I've ever met. I paused, squeezed her hands gently. At that ball, I'm going to walk in there with you on my arm, and I'm going to show every person in 3 territories that I've chosen the finest woman among them. Not despite your patched dresses, but because of what those patches represent. Skill, resilience, the refusal to be defeated. She looked up at me. In the fading light, I could see the hope fighting with fear in her eyes. I'm still scared, she whispered. So am I admitted. I've faced down a lot in my life, Emma, but I've never risked my heart like this, never let someone matter this much. But you know what? You're worth the risk. I left her there on the porch and rode home through the darkness. My mind was racing. William had maybe 6 months, maybe less. We needed to move faster than I'd planned. The Founders' Day ball was in 3 weeks. That would be our public declaration. After that, I'd propose formally. We could marry in spring when the apple trees bloomed. Give William the gift of seeing his daughter settled before he passed. It was a tight timeline. But I'd built a ranch in 14 years. I could court and marry a woman in 6 months if that's what it took. Back at Morrison Ridge, I found Daniel and told him everything. About William's condition, about getting his blessing, about my plans for the ball. You're really doing this, Daniel said. Going all in. Yes. Even though it's costing you business, even though half the territory thinks you're crazy, I looked at my younger brother. He needed to understand this. It was part of becoming a man. Daniel, in 14 years, I've built something impressive. Land, cattle, money. But you know what I didn't have until I met Emma? A reason for any of it. I was building an empire but had no one to share it with. No real home, just a house. No family, just employees. I paused, chose my words carefully. Emma Hartley isn't a risk to what I've built. She's the reason I built it in the first place, so that when I found someone worth it, I'd have something worth offering. The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation. I had a new suit made, simple but well-tailored. Bought my mother's pearl necklace from the jeweler in Salt Lake City where I'd pawned it years ago during a hard winter. It had been the last thing of hers I had, and getting it back felt like closing a circle. Meanwhile, my sister Grace appeared at the ranch. She was 28, visiting from Denver, where she'd been living since our mother died. Grace had our mother's steel spine and sharp tongue. I heard you're courting someone, she said, no preamble, and that you've made enemies over her. News travels. It does, so I visited this Emma Hartley myself. Wanted to see what kind of woman had my brother risking everything. My jaw tightened. Grace, if you went there to judge her. I went to meet her. And Jack, she's remarkable, smart, skilled, kind. And she's been working on a dress for this ball. The fabric, the design, it's going to be stunning. Better than anything those society women could buy. Relief flooded through me. You like her. I more than like her. I think she's exactly what you need. Someone who sees you, not your money. Someone who understands building something from nothing. Grace paused, smiled. I also told her I'd help. With the dress, with preparation. And Jack, I'm coming to that ball. If anyone says anything cruel to her, they'll have to deal with both Morrisons. The night before the ball, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my porch looking out over the land I'd spent 14 years building. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, I'd walk into that territorial hall with Emma on my arm and declare to everyone who mattered and many who didn't that I'd made my choice. Some would accept it. Some would be scandalized. The Ashfords would be furious. The Sterlings insulted. But the decent people, the ones whose opinions actually mattered, they'd see what I saw. Character, strength, worth. And if I was lucky, very lucky, Emma would see something too. That I was serious. That this wasn't a passing fancy or a rescue mission. That I loved her for exactly who she was. And that I wanted to spend the rest of my life proving it. I thought about my mother gone these 21 years. Wondered what she'd think of Emma. Then I smiled because I knew. She'd love her. Just like I did. Tomorrow the real battle began. Not with cattle or land or business, but for something far more important. For love. For family. For the future I'd been building toward without even knowing it. And I'd never been more ready for a fight in my life. The night of the Founders' Day celebration arrived with clear skies and stars sharp enough to cut. I dressed carefully in my new suit, simple but well made. The kind of thing a working man would wear to something important. Not trying to be something I wasn't, just presenting the best version of who I was. Daniel helped me with the collar studs. You ready for this? I've faced down blizzards and rustlers. A room full of society people doesn't scare me. It's not them you're worried about, it's her, whether this works. He was right, of course. My younger brother had grown wiser than I gave him credit for. Tonight wasn't about proving anything to Pinewood Springs society. It was about showing Emma that I meant every word I'd said, that I was all in. No hesitation, no retreat. I rode to the Hartley place as the last light faded from the western sky. My heart was hammering in a way it hadn't since I was 17 and broke and terrified. But this was a different kind of fear, the kind that comes when you have something precious to lose. The cabin door opened and Emma stepped out. I've seen beautiful things in my 31 years. Dawn breaking over the Rockies. Wild horses running across open prairie. Stars so thick they looked like spilled milk across the darkness. But nothing prepared me for Emma Hartley in that forest green dress. It wasn't just the dress, though, that was remarkable. Perfect fit, sophisticated, without being flashy. Evidence of real skill. No, it was the way she carried it, head high, shoulders back, eyes full of determination mixed with fear. She looked like a woman going into battle, which in a way she was. I dismounted, removed my hat, found I couldn't speak for a moment. Emma, I finally managed, you're breathtaking. Color rose in her cheeks. It's just a dress. No, it's armor, and you wear it like a queen. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. Her eyes widened. This isn't what you think, I said quickly. Not yet, but I want you to wear something tonight that connects you to my family, to my history. I opened the box. My mother's pearl necklace caught the lamplight, glowing soft and warm. It belonged to my mother. She wore it every Sunday to church. It was the only piece of jewelry she kept when my father started selling everything for drinking money. She hid it, made me promise to give it someday to someone worthy. I paused, met her eyes. I think she'd be happy knowing it's yours. Emma's hand trembled as she touched the pearls. Jack, I can't. This is too much. Please let me do this. Let me show you that you belong. Not just at this ball, but in my life. She turned, lifted her hair. I fastened the necklace around her throat with hands that weren't quite steady. When she turned back, the pearls settled perfectly against her skin. William appeared in the doorway. He'd rallied for tonight, determined to see his daughter off properly. He looked at Emma, and I saw tears in his eyes. "You look just like your mother did on our wedding day," he said. His voice was rough with emotion. "Beautiful, radiant, and braver than you know." He turned to me, extended his hand. We shook, and in that grip was everything. Trust, hope, a father's blessing, and a father's warning. "Bring my daughter home safe, Morrison, and prove to them all that they were wrong." The ride to town was quiet. Emma sat beside me in the carriage I'd borrowed for the occasion. Her hands were clasped tight in her lap. "What if this is a mistake?" she whispered. "Then it's my mistake, too. And Emma, I've made plenty of those. But this isn't one of them." As we approached the territorial hall, I could see lights blazing from every window. Carriages lined the street, the territory's elite in their finest clothes, gathering for the biggest social event of the season. Emma's breathing quickened. I reached over, covered her clasped hands with one of mine. "Remember what I told you. They don't decide your worth. You do. And you've already decided." I helped her down from the carriage, offered my arm. She took it, and I felt a tremor run through her. But her spine was straight. Her chin was up. That was my girl, scared but facing it anyway. We walked toward the entrance, every step deliberate, every step a choice. The moment we stepped through the door, conversation stopped, literally stopped. It was like watching ripples spread across a pond. One person saw us, nudged another, who turned and stared until the entire room was looking at us. Emma's grip on my arm tightened. I covered her hand with mine, kept walking. Mayor Thornton approached his wife Caroline behind him. To her credit, Caroline had the decency to look embarrassed. She knew what she'd done at Miller's, knew her part in the mockery. "Morrison," the mayor boomed, "good to see you, and who is this lovely young lady?" "Allow me to introduce Miss Emma Hartley," I said clearly. "Miss Hartley, Mayor Thornton, and his wife Caroline." I watched Caroline's face go pale. She opened her mouth closed. It managed a weak smile. "Miss Hartley," she finally said, "what a lovely dress." "Thank you," Emma replied. Her voice was steady. "I made it myself." The mayor's eyebrows rose. "Did you now? Remarkable workmanship. My wife has been looking for a skilled dressmaker." I saw Emma process this. The mayor's wife who'd stood by while others mocked her, now complimenting her work, wanting to hire her. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. We moved through the room. I introduced Emma to everyone who mattered. Ranch owners, businessmen, territorial officials. Some were genuinely welcoming. Some were clearly shocked, but too polite to show it. A few, like Frank Ashford, looked furious, but said nothing. And then Rebecca Sterling appeared. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than William's entire orchard. But next to Emma's simple elegance, it looked overdone, trying too hard. "Jack," Rebecca said, ignoring Emma completely, "we need to talk. Anything you need to say to me, you can say in front of Emma." Rebecca's smile was poisonous. "Fine, I just wanted to tell you that Father has found another partner for the Eastern Roads. Someone more reliable. Someone who understands the importance of proper social connections." She finally looked at Emma, gave her a dismissive once-over. "Someone who won't throw away business opportunities for a passing fancy." I felt anger rise hot and sharp. But before I could respond, Emma spoke. "Miss Sterling, I'm sorry you're disappointed, but I suspect your father's business decisions have more to do with Jack's integrity than his social connections. Men of character tend to recognize it in others." Rebecca's face flushed crimson. She opened her mouth, but I stepped forward slightly, putting myself between them. "Miss Sterling, I think this conversation is over. Enjoy your evening." I led Emma away, felt her shaking beside me, adrenaline and fear mixing together. "That was magnificent," I murmured. "Absolutely magnificent." The musicians struck up a waltz. This was it, the moment I'd planned for. "Dance with me," I said. "Jack, I don't know how to waltz. Trust me, I'll teach you." I led her onto the floor, placed my hand at her waist, felt her trembling under my palm. She was terrified, but she was doing it anyway. That was courage, real courage. "Just follow my lead," I said softly, "and look at me, only at me." We began to move. She stumbled once, but I caught her, guided her, and slowly she found the rhythm. We swept across the floor, and I was aware of every eye watching us. But I didn't care. All I cared about was the woman in my arms. Halfway through the dance, I made my decision. This was the moment. This was when I showed everyone who I was and what I wanted. Emma, I said, loud enough that nearby couples could hear, I need to tell you something. Jack people are listening. Good, let them listen. I pulled her slightly closer, looked into those brown eyes that had haunted me for months. I'm falling in love with you. I think I have been since that moment in Miller's store when you stood up to those women. But I know I am now, completely, hopelessly, forever in love with Emma Hartley. The couples near us stopped dancing. The ripple spread again. Soon the entire floor had stilled, everyone watching, everyone listening. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Jack, everyone can hear you. That's the point. I want them to hear. I want everyone in this territory to know that I've chosen the finest woman among them, and no opinion of theirs will change that. For a moment, I thought she might run, might pull away, but then something changed in her face. A decision made, a line crossed. I love you too, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the silence it carried. I've tried not to, tried to protect myself, but I can't help it. I love you, Jack Morrison. The room erupted. Some in applause, some in shocked whispers. But I didn't care about any of it, because Emma Hartley had just told me she loved me in front of half the territory, and that made me the richest man in 3 states. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. The governor's wife complimented Emma's dress, asked for her card. 3 other women commissioned dresses before the night was through. The mayor made a public speech acknowledging my good taste in companions. But the best moment came when I saw Mrs. Ashford leave early, unable to bear watching. That felt like victory. When I finally brought Emma home, the sky was just starting to lighten in the east. William was waiting on the porch despite the hour wrapped in blankets. Well, he asked. Emma's smile could have lit the whole territory. It was perfect, Papa. Everything was perfect. I helped her down from the carriage. Our hands lingered together longer than necessary. I'll see you Tuesday, I said. Tuesday, she agreed. But as I rode home, I knew Tuesday wouldn't be just another visit. Tuesday would be when I took her to the creek. When I asked her properly, when I made my intentions absolutely clear. I defended her honor in Miller's store. I declared my love at the ball. Now it was time to offer her my future. The next week felt like the longest of my life. I had the ring, my grandmother's gold band with a single pearl. I'd retrieved it from the bank vault where I'd kept it safe all these years, knowing that someday I'd find the right woman. Tuesday finally arrived. I told Emma I wanted to show her something important. She agreed without hesitation. We rode out to the creek together, that place where I'd made my vow 14 years ago. The water ran clear and cold over smooth stones. Evergreens lined the banks, dark and timeless. This was my sacred ground, the place where I'd decided who I would become. I came here the day after my father died, I told her. 17 years old, broke, terrified. Everyone said I'd fail just like him. That bad blood always tells. I paused, looked at the water flowing past, constant and unchanging. But I made a promise here, that I would be different, that I would build something good, that I would prove them all wrong. I turned to face her, and I did. I built Morrison Ridge from nothing, created something that will last long after I'm gone. But Emma, I realized something. I built half a life. I have the land, the cattle, the success, but I don't have anyone to share it with. No real home, no family. I took her hands in mine. Until I saw you standing in that mercantile, I didn't even know what was missing. But now I do, and Emma, I want to build the other half, with you. She was crying, tears streaming down her face. Jack, I want that too. But what about Papa? I can't leave him. I would never ask you to. There's room at Morrison Ridge. We'll build him his own cabin, close enough for you to care for him, far enough for privacy. He'll be family, Emma, not a burden, family. But people will talk. They'll say I trapped you, that I'm not good enough. I cupped her face in my hands, made her look at me. Emma Hartley, I've spent 14 years building a ranch that everyone said was impossible. I've survived everything this territory could throw at me. Do you really think I care what people say? I paused, let her see the truth in my eyes. You're not bringing me down. You're completing me. You're the reason I built all of this in the first place, so that when I found you, I'd have something worth offering. I dropped to one knee there by the creek, pulled out the ring. I know this is fast. I know we've only known each other a few months. But Emma, I've never been more certain of anything. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me at Morrison Ridge? Will you let me spend every day proving you made the right choice? She looked down at me, at the ring, at the hope and fear and love all mixed together in my face. Yes, she whispered, yes to all of it. Yes, forever. I slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly like it had been made for her. Then I stood and kissed her. Not a gentle, polite kiss, but a real one, deep and sure and full of promise. When we finally broke apart, both of us were shaking. When, she asked. When should we marry? Spring, I said. When the apple trees bloom. That feels right. Beginning our marriage when everything is starting fresh and new. That gives us time to prepare, to build, to make sure Papa is settled. I pulled her close, held her against my chest, let her hear my heartbeat. Emma, your father is getting weaker. Doc doesn't think he'll make it past spring. But if we marry when the trees bloom, he'll be there. He'll see you settled and happy. We can give him that gift. She nodded against my chest, understanding, accepting. The next months were a whirlwind of preparation. I built a cabin near the creek, not the main ranch house, something that would be truly ours. Emma had input on every decision. Window placement, kitchen layout, a sewing room with perfect southern light. William rallied as winter deepened, seemed determined to live long enough to see his daughter married. Doc came weekly now, managing pain-adjusting treatments. But we all knew. We were racing time. One week before the wedding, I brought William to see the finished cabin. He was so weak, Doc and I had to help him walk. But he insisted on seeing every room. In Emma's sewing room, he smiled. Your mother would have loved this. She always wanted good light for her needlework. In the main room, looking out over the creek, he nodded approval. Good land, good water. You chose well, Morrison. Then he gathered us both. His voice was thin but clear. I need to say this while I have the strength. You two have given me a gift these past months. You've let me see my daughter find real happiness. You've included me in my plans and your future. You've made my last days about joy instead of just decline. He paused, looked at each of us. I'm at peace. I've lived a good life, loved a good woman, raised a daughter I'm proud of. And now I get to see that daughter marry a good man who values her properly. That's more than most fathers receive. He took our hands, placed them together. Build a beautiful life together. Fill this house with love and laughter and eventually children. Tend the orchards and the land. And remember that your old papa loved you and was happy. We were all crying by then, but they were good tears, clean tears, the kind that wash away fear and leave only love. April came with warm winds and the promise of new life. And true to William's predictions, the apple trees began to bloom. Thousands of white and pink blossoms covering the branches like snow. The wedding morning dawned clear and perfect. I dressed in my suit, hands shaking slightly as I fastened the buttons. Not from fear, from anticipation. Daniel stood beside me as best man. Grace had arrived from Denver to stand with Emma, and what felt like half the territory had gathered at the Hartley orchard, sitting in chairs arranged between the blooming trees. But my eyes were only for the end of that aisle where Emma would appear. And then she did, walking slowly on her father's arm. William was breathing hard, leaning on Doc Patterson for support. But he was upright. He was walking. He'd kept his promise. Emma wore cream silk, simple, elegant, perfect. My mother's pearls at her throat, her mother's ring on a chain beside them, her hair swept up with flowers from the orchard woven through. When she reached me, William placed her hand in mine. His grip was weak, but his eyes were fierce. Take care of her, he said. I'll spend every day earning that trust, sir. You have my solemn word. The ceremony was simple, was traditional. The Reverend spoke about partnership and commitment, about building lives together through good times and bad. When it came time for vows, I looked into Emma's eyes and spoke from my heart. I, Jack, take you, Emma, to be my wife. I promise to honor you, to cherish you, to be your partner in all things. I promise to value your wisdom, respect your strength, and love you completely for all the days of my life." Emma's voice was clear and strong. "I, Emma, take you, Jack, to be my husband. I promise to honor you, to support you, to be your partner in building our future. I promise to bring my whole self to our marriage, my skills, my heart, my dreams, and to love you completely for all the days of my life." We exchanged rings, mine joining hers on her finger, hers fitting on my work-roughened hand like it belonged there. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Utah, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jack, you may kiss your bride." I cupped Emma's face in my hands and kissed her, gently, sweetly, with all the tenderness I'd been holding back for months. Around us, people applauded and cheered, but I barely heard them. "Mrs. Morrison," I said when we finally broke apart. "Mr. Morrison," she replied with a smile that could have powered the sun. The reception at Morrison Ridge was everything I'd hoped: food and music and celebration. But the best part was watching William sit in a comfortable chair, watching everything with deep contentment. As evening approached, Emma sat beside him. I joined them, saw how gray he'd become, how labored his breathing. "I'm ready now," he told Emma. "I've seen you married to a good man. I've seen you happy and settled. I've done what I needed to do." "Don't talk like that, Papa, not today. Especially today," he said gently. "Today is about endings and beginnings. I'm at peace, child. When my time comes, whether it's tomorrow or next month, I'll go easy knowing you're cared for." That night, we took him home, got him settled in bed. Doc Patterson stayed managing his comfort. And in the early hours of the morning, while Emma and I slept in each other's arms for the first time in our new cabin, William Hartley slipped away, peacefully, with a smile on his face. Mission accomplished. We buried him 3 days later at the edge of his beloved orchard under the blooming trees he'd spent 15 years cultivating. The whole territory came, everyone who'd known him or been touched by his quiet wisdom. Emma cried in my arms, grieving the father she'd loved her entire life. But even through tears, there was gratitude. He'd lived to see her married. He'd seen her happy and settled and loved. He'd gotten everything he wanted, and he'd left in peace. 5 years later, I sit on the porch of our cabin, watching the sunset over the Warren Morrison orchard. That's what we call it now, honoring both families, both legacies. It's the largest commercial orchard in 3 territories. Hundreds of trees using William's techniques and Emma's expertise, famous for quality and innovation. Emma publishes articles in agricultural journals. Farmers write from across the West asking for consultations. Her sewing business employs 12 women now. Garments shipping as far as San Francisco and Denver. She hires women from circumstances like hers once was, gives them opportunities they'd never have otherwise. Inside our cabin, 3 children sleep. Clara Rose, 4 years old, with my gray eyes and Emma's dark hair. William, 2 years old, named for the grandfather he'll never meet, but whose legacy he'll carry. And Sarah Jane, 6 months old, already showing signs of her mother's determination. This morning, Emma and I went to town, to Miller's General Store. Mrs. Thornton was there asking about dresses for the winter season. "Mr. Miller pulled me aside. "I felt guilty for years about that day," he said. "When those women mocked your wife and I said nothing. You had a business to protect. I understand. But you didn't let that stop you. You saw wrong being done and you corrected it. And look at what Mrs. Morrison has built since then. It's been an honor to witness." Tonight, Emma stands at the porch railing, looking out over the orchard. Hundreds of trees blooming in the spring twilight. The future William planted 20 years ago continued and expanded, honoring his vision while reaching toward new possibilities. I join her, wrap my arms around her from behind. "What are you thinking about?" she asks. "About that day at Miller's, about the decision I made in a split second, and how it changed everything." "Any regrets?" I pull her closer. "Not one. That was the best decision I ever made. Not because it brought me to you, though that would be enough, but because it was the moment I decided who I wanted to be." Emma leans back against me. "You remember what they called my dress, a quilt pretending to be a dress. They meant it as an insult. And they were wrong about everything except one thing," I say. "That dress was made of scraps, pieces sewn together with care and skill. And that's what life is too. We take the scraps we're given, the hardship and loss, the struggle and pain, And we sew them together with love and determination into something beautiful, something whole. She gestures to everything around us, the orchard, the cabin, the ranch beyond. This is our quilt, Jack, made from scraps of grief and hope, poverty and perseverance, mockery and kindness. And it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I hold my wife as the stars begin to appear. Think about that scared, angry boy I'd been at 17. About the empire I'd built to prove everyone wrong. About the woman in a patched dress who'd shown me what real strength looked like. We built something good here. Not just a ranch or an orchard, but a legacy. A legacy of standing up for what's right, of seeing value where others see only surface, of building something that lasts long after we're gone. Inside, our children dream of tomorrow. Outside, the apple trees bloom like they do every spring. And somewhere, I like to think William Hartley and my mother are watching. Proud of what we've built. Proud of the choice I made that Wednesday morning in October of 1876. The choice that changed everything. The choice to defend the finest woman in the room. I was right then. I'm right still. And I'll be right forever.